Welcome to the High Adventure Scouting Podcast. This is the source for all things high adventure for scouts, scouters, and anyone else interested in promoting high adventure trips for our youth. You can find all kinds of great high adventure options for your scouts at highadventurescouting.com. We are constantly updating the list of cool trips, and we want your input on your best trip. Welcome, high adventure enthusiasts. We're excited as always to highlight a high adventure base on this edition of the High Adventure Scouting Podcast. Today we are joined by Al Davis, Director for the Salmon River High Adventure Base located in Idaho. Al, thanks for joining us today on the High Adventure Scouting Podcast.
It's great to be here.
Well, I give this caveat every time I do a podcast. Those of us in different parts of the country probably don't know much about programs up in Idaho unless you live there. So I want to give the listeners a little more information about your program. So we'll just kind of start off initially and just give me a quick overview of the programs that are offered at Salmon River High Adventure Base, and we can just kind of go from there. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Awesome.
Salmon River High Adventure Base is located, the closest town would be Riggins, Idaho. We're about 20 miles upriver from Riggins. The council started running that base in the early 60s, late 50s. I suppose the late 60s is when it kind of became a high adventure base. We offer basically 4 different types of trek that are all whitewater. So we offer a 3-day trip, which is 2 nights, 3 days. We float roughly 40 miles in there.
Okay.
And that is we do rafting and inflatable kayaks on that section. And at that camp, what we do is everyone comes to camp, they set up camp there, and then we float, come back to camp, float another section, come back to camp, and then float, and then they go home from there. The other sections that we float are, we do the main salmon, which is a true wilderness experience. We float 80 miles through the Frank Church Wilderness area. So once you leave the road at Corn Creek, you won't see another road for 80 miles until we get to Carey Creek. And that one is a 5-day trip, and it's an amazing adventure for youth, and a great way to build teamwork. Where it's all inclusive. We provide the meals. We provide a sleeping pad, all the cooking utensils, guides, equipment. It's pretty much all inclusive except for personal gear. And then our next adventure would be what we call Lower Salmon River Canyons. And that is a 60-mile section, not quite as alpine-ish as the main salmon, but it's big white sandy beaches. It's at the bottom of the Salmon River. In fact, we drop into the Snake River at the confluence into Hell's Canyon, which is the deepest gorge in North America. Beautiful canyons. And on that trip, after we floated 3 days, then we actually get on a jet boat in the Snake River and we jet boat up to finish the trip. And we do about 30 miles on a jet boat. So it's kind of 2 adventures in one. And then we also do that same trip with inflatable kayaks. So every scout or scout leader pilots their own boat, and they have a dry bag with their equipment in the back. We do bring a raft with all the camp gear, chairs, sleeping pads, kitchen, and that kind of equipment. And usually we like a scout to do one of the other trips prior to doing that, just so they have an idea that what they're getting into. But those are basically our adventures that we do there.
We all know the major high adventure bases around the country, and they offer some awesome programs. Have you been searching for a cool alternative from your typical high adventure trip? As a scout leader, I want to give our scouts some great alternatives. You need to check out highadventurescouting.com. You'll find information on over 30 different council high adventure bases in 24 states. Maybe you're looking for a do-it-yourself option and need some ideas. Maybe you've taken a great trip and you want to share your good fortune with your fellow scouts and scouters. Just send us the details and we'll publish your trip. Whatever your interest, highadventurescouting.com is the one-stop shop for all things high adventure. That's highadventurescouting.com. So it almost sounds like there's a small, medium, and large sort of option. So
absolutely,
kind of a starter, 3-day trip, 40 miles, and then kind of the middle would be the 60 mile trip, and then the grand poobah, the 80-mile trip. Is that? And that, I'm kind of simplifying it, I know, but that's kind of what it sounds like to me. So it sounds
absolutely,
awesome.
It's the trifecta of whitewater fun.
That sounds great. I've only done whitewater in North Carolina and West Virginia. I'm not sure I can consider it whitewater or not. It was okay.
I was going to say, yeah, the difference between us, the West and the East, is we have rapids.
Exactly.
Just teasing.
Exactly. Well, we took I was at the National Jamboree in 2017, and we took the whitewater option while we were there, and it was almost like a canoe option. We were kind of like, really? We should be in canoes. It was a lot of paddling. So, and that was would be my first question is, is there a classification for the, is it,
Absolutely.
3 to 5 or 3 to 4 where you're at for these treks?
Yeah, so all 3 of these sections have class 4 rapids in them. Although at the bottom of the drainage, I mean, it's a big river, and so you can go around rapids you don't have to take them head on necessarily. But so the main salmon has, depending on the water level, 6 or 7 class 4 rapids, and probably 30 or 40 class 3 rapids, and then a lot of class 2 rapids. The lower Salmon River canyons is very similar rapid wise. I guess there are 2 class 4 rapids in that section, but they're just as frequent. And as far as space between rapids, and it is I would say the main difference between the two is the scenery. The main salmon is a little more alpine, and the lower salmon is a little bit more deserty, I guess, is what you'd say. But both beautiful.
No, Idaho is a contradiction from top to bottom. It's different wherever you go. So
absolutely.
Yeah, and I haven't been in the middle of the state, but I've been on the top and the bottom. So they were completely different from Coeur d'Alene all the way down to the smiley face on the bottom of the state. So
yeah.
Now you mentioned the Snake River on one of these. All I can think of is Evel Knievel jumping over the Snake River, and I know you're not going to be jumping over the Snake River, and that kind of dates me a little bit. So
yeah,
but
I was cool. There when he jumped. I remember
really
well. Yeah.
I've seen the earth ramp that's still there when I was, and I can't remember what town it was in.
Twin Falls.
Twin Falls. Okay, there's too many falls, yeah. And I couldn't get to it, but I could see it. So the the 10-year-old in me was excited when I went, but most kids today they have no idea who Evel Knievel is, but he was a superstar back then. So
For sure.
yeah. It sounds like you were talking about kind of the 3-day trip. You kind of go out and back every night. How about the other trips? Are you camping on the as you go? Are you going back and forth each day for the longer trips? What's the layout of that?
No, the other two trips are a true whitewater expedition in the sense that we launch on the river, and on the main salmon, you will not see the road again. So you are committed once you start. And so that is permitted by the Forest Service. And so they assign us campsites, but we're about 20 miles a night, 15 to 20 miles a night. And so we set up camp, we'll float 15 or 20 miles, set up camp. And we bring chairs, and typically people bring their own tents.
Okay.
And we set up a kitchen, and we'll camp there all night. A lot of side hikes, a lot of history in the Salmon River. In fact, the main salmon just above where we put in is where Lewis and Clark called it quits.
Oh,
on
awesome.
on their aspirations of having a water way across the country. So, and then there's several side hikes. There's a lot of old mines, a lot of old homesteads along the river, Indian pictographs that we stop and visit, as well as hot springs on the main salmon that we'll stop at hot springs and enjoy those. So yeah.
And I think I'm sold already. This sounds awesome. It's funny you talk about the where you're at. The Lewis and Clark kind of ended their trip. Where I live in the St. Louis area, and that's where they started their trip down the Missouri. So kind of we have start to finish here. So that's kind of fun. So yeah. Is there a minimum size for crews wanting to come out? You have to have so many, or do you group people together, or are there provisional options? What's the main layout as far as scout groups go?
So on our 3-day option, there are no limits on numbers, and we can handle groups up to about 200.
Oh, wow.
And we have done that, and we'll mix several troops in together for the HAB, Salmon River High Adventure Base Camp. The main salmon and the lower Salmon River Canyon sections are both limited to 25 people by the Forest Service. And so the way we like to have a minimum group of 4, which is how many we have in each boat. And then 4 people and their guide. So we do like to sell it as at least 4 people as a group of 4, but we keep a waiting list, and we'll fill in with onesie twosies and more.
Sure.
A lot of troops. It is a popular. It's a popular high adventure, and so we offer that you can buy the whole trip, and I would say about 90% of our groups do that.
Mm-hmm.
And they just fill it in with dads and moms. It's it's the one scouting event that a lot of times you'll have more adults than kids. So.
Yeah, I can understand. I mean, I've lived out all my almost lived out all my high adventure interests with my son, and we've been, and hopefully we'll get to go to Philmont eventually, but we haven't yet. But I love doing this kind of stuff, and it gives me an excuse to tell my wife, well, my son wants to go, so I've got to go too. So
Yeah, you got
When
to
he
make sure
ages out, that won't be quite as easy to to do.
just
But
got to get him involved as a leader.
yeah, exactly. So that's for sure. Now, is there like a crew cost, like, or is it per person, or how do you guys work that? Because it's different every place you go.
So in the past, we have done it per person, and we still do it that way somewhat. But with recent events, we've just found it that it's good. We sell it by the boat, so 4 people,
Okay,
and uh, and that way that group can socially distance.
right,
Um,
right.
but so yeah, we kind of do it both ways.
Awesome. Where do most of the uh, crews come from geographically? I'm assuming that you'll have quite a bit from the western United States, considering where you're at. But where do you see pockets from around different parts of the country?
We certainly do, and things have changed in the last few years out in this part of the country. We used to limit it each adventure to one out of council troop per year
Mhm.
because it is a limited number of launches that we get. But that is no longer the case. It's now open to everyone. But we've always filled those and have a waiting list. The trip has actually been featured in Boy's Life 3 different times since its inception, and each time we've done that, we've really filled up with the out of council dates. But we've had groups from Alabama, Florida, Texas, Missouri. We talked about
Yeah.
Seattle, Portland, um, really all over. We've had them from Hawaii. We've had scouts from Japan in the past. So we we love to have them all. It's interesting to meet folks from all over the country and see the way they scout is awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, and this sounds like a lot of fun. So, now you mentioned that a lot of troops will bring their own tents. If somebody didn't want to bring tents, do you guys have that available, or is that something that they need to bring with them? Uh,
Um, we can bring tents for them. That's absolutely a possibility. We've just found that a lot of and what we do on that is we do try to, if it's a 6-man tent, we like to have 6 boys in the tent. If it's a 3-man tent, we like to have 2 or 3 boys in it. We just we've had groups show up and everyone seems to have their own 6-man tent, you know, which there is a little bit of limited space on a raft.
yes, I can
So,
understand. We took a trip on the in the Boundary Waters last year, and we had to really pare down even more than we do for backpacking trip. I mean,
wow.
everything had to fit in a personal gear in a small bag, and that's all you got. And so I think our group had we had 2 adults and 5 boys, and all 5 boys were in one tent, a big 5-man tent. So and there's no way you could get me in a tent that big with that many boys. It was
No,
it didn't
that's
smell good, but
for sure.
yeah, but
And a lot of times the tents never even get taken out of their dry bag.
oh really?
Um,
Oh.
yeah, typically you're sleeping on a white sandy beach, which sounds kind of odd when you're up in the forest, and but typically you're on a white sandy beach, and so we have these sleeping pads that are there. We bring the sleeping pads because they're waterproof, but they're about a 3-inch pad. They're super comfortable, and so a lot of times the boys will just lay those out on the beach and they'll sleep in a section, and the adults will lay them out in their own little clusters, and so a lot of times we don't even set up tents.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We couldn't do that up in Minnesota last summer because the mosquitoes would keep us up. But that sounds. I'm sure you don't have quite as many problems with that up there. So
Yeah, that is one of the things that really shocks most people when they come, is because it is a quick moving river. There are really no places for mosquitoes to spawn, so that we do not have mosquitoes on the river.
interesting. Interesting.
So
Well, that was a fact of what I've talked about down in Louisiana, in the swamp area. They were telling me that they don't have as many problems with mosquitoes down there either. There's predators for the mosquitoes,
wow.
so and for the mosquito larvae. So, which I had you'd figure there'd be a lot, but I see
Huh.
that's why you need to learn about all these places. So, well, what kind of we've covered a lot. I mean, this kind of gives you all kinds of different options. What any other interesting facts about uh, these trips on this in Idaho that would be cool that we haven't covered?
Um, well, it is. I think the most unique part about it is a wilderness trip. So there is access through backcountry airstrips, but really, a lot of times we are 40 or 50 miles away from the closest road, which does present challenges. I mean, and we definitely uh, have safety protocols as far as satellite communication and things like that. But it's an amazing trip to be able. I mean, I've listened to other high adventures, and they'll say we have the boys leave their cell phones in the car. Well, they can bring them, but you're not going to get any cell service.
That's what I and I keep bringing up the Boundary Waters because that's the most remote place I've been on a scout trip, and we told the same thing to our boys is number one, you're not going to be able to use it because there are no towers up here, and we're going to leave as adults. We're going to leave ours at base camp also, and that's one boy decided to bring it with him, and he found out that there's no cell signal.
No
Well,
cell signal and a good chance to get it ruined. But
exactly. So, well, where do and that brings up another question I didn't ask is how do troops what's the general mode of transportation up there? Let's say if, I'm sure you can drive in, but is there what's the closest uh, place to fly into? Is
s-
there? Is that Boise or is that somewhere else?
it's Boise or Spokane.
Okay,
So
that's a
we'll
Coeur
have
d'Alene area. Okay.
Coeur d'Alene area, yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll have troops fly in. Typically, they'll rent a 15 passenger van or some sort of vehicle like that and drive in. We do have options. We use a transportation company to shuttle us around. It is the main salmon is I mean, it's a true, I mean, it's wilderness. So it's an 80-mile float, but the shuttle to drive around is 422 miles.
Oh wow.
So, and we do all the shuttling for your vehicles to make sure that that is taken care of. On the lower Salmon River Gorge, we shuttle vehicles and use a jet boat
Oh
that we'd
wow.
mentioned earlier. So that's pretty fun.
That's interesting. It's just amazing that there's that much space and that difficult to get to places. I think a lot of us in the center of the country don't understand how long it takes.
Yeah, it's a full 9.5 hours to drive from one end of the main Salmon to the other.
Wow.
The other thing that's interesting to note is the Salmon River is the longest free flowing river that is undammed in the lower 48 states.
Oh wow. I didn't know that.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds like a really cool trip. Depending on what you want to do from real small to kind of an advanced trip. Now, I would say probably one last question I would have. You mentioned about some of the the 60 and 80 mile trips that you really want the boys especially to have some experience on the river. Um, is that requirements, or is there something that they can do that at another? Say they can do another trip and then get ready for that one somewhere else, and then come up to your place. What's
Um,
typical?
they can certainly come and just about at any level come and go. If they can pass the BSA swim check, then they're pretty good. They're good to go. We do require that they do the swim check before they come, and they can certify themselves with the BSA swim check, and then they need to do a physical,
Right.
just like always.
Okay.
The one that we like them to do one of the other trips first before they do is our kayaking adventure,
Okay.
which is a fun trip. It's 60 miles, and it's this. You might have floated the same section in a raft in years prior, but in this one, everyone has their own kayak. That's also they sleep in that also.
Oh.
So it's kind of a fun adventure.
Is the kind of the one person kayak, is that the more popular than being in the the 5 person raft, or what's the which one's more popular, or is it about the same?
The rafts are more popular for sure. Typically, they just do the kayaks after they've been 1 or 2 times. We have troops that want to come every single year.
Oh wow.
They just love it. And so when the boys get to be 16, 17, they're ready for a little more adventure. And so we can put them in an inflatable kayak. Some people would call them a ducky.
Yeah, I've been in one of those.
Yeah.
my son and I got tossed out of one in on the New River Gorge years ago, and they don't maneuver really well when you kind of go down into a hole. So, but
No,
they're fun otherwise.
That's what we call making memories.
Yeah, we remember that because everything flew out and we forgot to paddle. We were told to paddle, to keep paddling, and we went down in a kind of a depression, and we stopped paddling. We were kind of freaked out, and we talk about that occasionally. So
yeah,
but well, awesome. Well, this sounds like a really cool trip, and I encourage everybody to take a look at this. And Al, I want to thank you for joining us today. We had a lot of stuff to talk about, and everybody's going to have to find that information on their own.
Okay.
But I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, I want to thank Al Davis, director from the Salmon River High Adventure Base. Now, you can get more information on the program at 2 different areas. One's the Mountain West Council, and the other one's Grand Teton Council. Thanks for joining us today, and remember to tell your friends about this podcast. You can find us online at highadventurescouting.com, on Facebook or Instagram. If you have any questions or ideas for future podcasts, just email us at info@highadventurescouting.com. This podcast and website are independent and not affiliated with any youth organization. Happy high adventure! This has been a production of High Adventure Resources.